Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. It's a source of fashion here, back with another tutorial. So in this video I want to take you through how to draft the Milkmaid corset pattern. So if that's what you're interested in, please keep on watching. I have my pattern here already, and I've gone ahead to draw out my basic bodice measurements. I have a tutorial on how to draft a basic bodice block, so if you don't understand any of these, then please watch that video first. So I have a shoulder measurement, and I'm taking my shoulder slant. This is my armhole line. From there I got my chest line, my bust point, under bust point, and my front half length. I've explained what the front half length is in almost all my videos. And then I have the bust span line stopping right at the bust point because this is for the front. And I also have my back pattern here. There's nothing too complicated going on for the back. I just have a basic bodice measurement as usual. The difference is that I'm using my back half length. Let's focus on the front. There are so many ways to make a Milkmaid pattern, but I'm going to be doing something a little different from what some of you are familiar with. I've noticed that for most Milkmaid dresses, the bust area is always dropping. It lacks structure. So that is what I'm going to address in this tutorial, and I think this is one of the best ways to make your Milkmaid dress look really professional and give that corset vibe. So I'm going to first of all do the underbust and overbust suppression. This is usually overlooked because some people just take the normal measurement for the front, go ahead and separate from the underbust and do a slash and spread, but that's not what we're going to be doing here. So do the underbust and overbust suppression. I'm going to divide the shoulder into two, which I have marked, and connect it to the bust point. If you have watched other tutorials on my channel on how to draft like a tube top or a corset, you are very familiar with this. You always have to divide the shoulder by two and connect it to the bust pan line, which stops at the bust point. Now the next thing to do is the underbust suppression, but before I do the underbust suppression, here's what I'm going to do. This is my original underbust point, but for a Milkmaid dress, you don't want the bust area to be like too wide, and you want it to be able to pack up properly. So what you want to do is to raise this underbust point by half of an inch. And I'm going to use my ruler to measure that out. So I'm going to use this color of marker to differentiate it. So this is my new underbust point. You're going to ignore this one. Most Milkmaid dresses, because this bust area is pleated, it's going to give a bit more volume. So you don't want the volume to be overpowering like the entire half length, the entire bodice. So what you want to do is to extend the waist a bit by an inch or 2 inches. I'm going to use 1 inch. So this is my original half length. You can see that the difference is not much. So you want it to be a bit longer to give that like small waist kind of vibe. This is completely optional, but I like to do this. So I'm going to also come and extend my half length by 1 inch. Mind you, I'm also going to be doing this for the back. For the underbust suppression, I'm going to do it obviously at the underbust point. And you don't want to make the cup to be like very visible because it's for a Milkmaid, but you want it to be just enough to be able to hold the bust area and give it a nice curve. So for me, I'm a bust 37. I usually use 2.5 inch, but for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to use just 2 inches. So this one, I want it to be equal on both sides. So remember, you don't take anything more than 1 inch from the center front. So I'm just going to place my tape rule on the bust band line. So 1 inch is here, 1 inch is on the other side as well. And take my 1 inch on both sides. Then you want to come to this shoulder area and also take 2 inches off. The reason I'm taking 2 inches is because if you take just like say half inch on both sides, by the time you connect it to this point, it's not really going to be significant. So I'm going to come and take 1 inch on this line that divided the shoulder, and also take this equally on both sides. Okay, now to connect these two to the bust point, you want to first of all come to the bust point, mark half of an inch below the bust point. This is where the connection for the under bust will stop, and for the over bust, mark half of an inch as well. I know at this point you're probably thinking, isn't this just a simple bustier pattern? But just keep on watching and you'll see the difference that I'm going to do later. So for this side, you always want to use a curve, connect it to this half an inch point below the bust point. And I'm also going to do the same thing here. And now for this side, you always want to use a straight line. I'm going to connect it to the half an inch point above the bust point. So usually for a simple shoulder dart bustier pattern, you always replace what to take up the shoulder. But in this case, I'm not going to be replacing it because this is a Milkmaid dress and the shoulder area is usually very slim. So now that that has been done, for this part, you want to extend it all the way to the half length. So remember, this is our extended half length. So it's just going to be a little bit of a drop waist. Okay. So now that that is done, before we continue with the Milkmaid pattern, you want to just come and take your body measurement. So my waist is 28. 28 divided by 4 will give me 7. But remember, we took off 2 inches from here. You need to replace that. So I'm going to add it back, and this is it here. Then I'm going to come to the bust. 37 divided by 4 will give me 9.25, and I'm going to connect that as well. For this side, you want whatever is at the bust point to also be at the chest line. So I'm going to come in straight this way. Of course, the next thing to do now is to take the armhole measurement. For the front, you come up by 3 inches, come in by half of an inch. First of all, use a straight ruler to connect these 2 points before connecting it. So you want to connect from here to meet with this bust measurement. Okay. So guys, the next thing to do now is the side dart. This side dart is the difference between the front half length and the back half length. So my front half length is 17 and a half. My back half length is 15 and a half. 17 and a half minus 15 and a half will give me 1.5 inch, 1.5 inch. So that is what I'm going to take off. And for that, I'm going to come to the bust point, come down by that 1.5 inch and connect it back. Okay. So you're going to go ahead and take all of this off. I know this is just like a simple bustier pattern right now. Very soon we're going to move on to the Milkmaid parts of this because we are not done yet, okay? Before we continue, this place needs to close up. So to be able to close this part, you either open from the top or from the bottom to give this place space. So I'm going to come here, okay? And now for this side, I'm also going to just slash it. So guys, after making that slash, now this place can be closed up, and the easiest way to do this is to come this way. So this line, you want to fold it up and bring it to this one. Okay, and that's how this dart is going to be closed. So you're going to use a tip to secure this, and you can see that there is a gap here that is going to be corrected. Also note that when you are doing this, make sure that you have not added your seam allowance to the side so that it's not going to be cut off when you close up the side down. It's just easier this way. So to correct this gap, you just want to connect from the gap back to the chest line. Okay, and with that you have corrected the gap. I'm going ahead to secure this with a tape. Now the next thing I'm going to do is add my seam allowance. So to this side, I'm going to use 1.5 inch. So guys, at this point the bustier pattern is almost complete, but remember that's not what we're going for. This is just the foundation. So if you skipped this entire part, welcome, we're moving on to doing the Milkmaid design. So I'm going to go ahead and cut everything out, separate this, cut off the suppression, then we'll move on to doing the Milkmaid design. The first thing I want to do is determine my chest line. I know this is the original chest line, but you can decide to increase it just a little bit, okay? And if you wanted to stop right at the chest line, that's fine. You are just going to go ahead and cut off from here, cut it straight, but that's not what I'm going for. So I want to curve this just a little bit. So mind you, I know in most of my tutorials I always say measure the curve, measure the curve. But I can tell you for free that this part is going to be the same thing because I took equal suppressions on both sides. So if I measure it's giving me almost 5.7. So if I measure this one too, it's also giving me 5.7. So it's equal. You don't need to worry about one being shorter than the other. So what I'm going to do is to connect these 2 points together to be able to draw out my chest line, because remember I said I want this to come up a bit. So I've gone ahead to take this. Now I can draw out the chest line. So I can't just extend from the chest line this way. I need to curve it a little bit. So I'm going to extend mine by 1.5 inch. Before doing that, let me just correct what I have here, because you can see that the line is not straight anymore. So you're just going to correct that and then add your 1.5 inch. Remember I said you can't just come up this way, so you want to curve it so that when you are done sewing it won't be looking somehow. So I'm just going to curve this back into the armhole like this. Okay, you can even use your free hand for this. You just curve it back in, and with that you have added more coverage to your chest area. Now I can go ahead and separate it back, because now we are moving on to doing the main thing. Just so it's not confusing, let me use a pink marker to highlight that this is what we are working with. So for this front side, obviously it's going to be cut off completely. So I'm going to come and cut it this way. Okay. Well, for this side, you want this to have a strap. You usually want this to have a strap. So if you are going to cut it together with a strap, it will be this way. You want it straight. Okay. But I'm not going to be cutting it with the strap. So you can also measure how wide you want the strap to be. I'm actually okay with what I have here. That's why I just went in straight. What I have is 1.1 inch. So you can make it less or more. But my advice is that if you are going for anything smaller than this, then you should take it up from the shoulder here rather than here. so the strap won't be dropping from the shoulder. So you can just come and extend the armhole back in and make your strap this way. However, I'm not going for any of this. I prefer to attach my strap to the corset later. So assuming you do not want to do yours that way, you come like this and then cut this way to add your strap. Remember, when you do this, everything will balance. But I'm cutting mine completely off and I'll reattach that later. You do want to take note of what you have taken off, because that's also determine the length of your strap later. So I took off 6.5 inch. This 6.5 inches including my joining allowance. So when I want to cut out my strap, I'm going to do 6.5 times 2. Take note of that. So guys, the first part is done. Now the second thing to do is to join these two sides back together, because remember, we are going for a Milkmaid design. For this side, it's quite simple, very straightforward. Now before we continue, remember that for a Milkmaid, it's not everywhere that you pleat. It usually comes this way. So what you want to do is to measure 1 inch or 1.5 inch away from the bust area. So it's only the bust area that is going to be pleated. I'm going to use a pink marker for this. So I'm going to come, remember that this is my seam allowance, so I'm not going to be including that. I'm using my actual body measurement. I'm going to measure 1 inch. So ideally, if you're attaching the strap, it's going to be joined, this part is going to be joined with the strap. So I'm just going to come and use a straight ruler to connect it. Okay, then you want to curve it back in, and for this you actually want it to be kind of sharp curve. Okay, so I'm doing a sharp curve for this. Instead of, if it is for a corset, you know it's not going to be this way. You can watch my corset tutorial if you're not familiar with it. You don't want it to be sharp, but for this, it's a Milkmaid. You want the cutout to be obvious. So I'm going to come and connect it like this. So now, all of this is going to be one piece. I'm going to go ahead and cut it out. As you can see, the Milkmaid design is coming out. So now, let me explain this part. Of course, this is not how it is going to be displayed, because you want it to be pleated. Some people usually do a slash and spread, but I think it's unnecessary to do a slash and spread in this case, because if you slash all of this off, you're going to miss the pattern. So basically, the idea is that this is going to be a base, then you're going to have another fabric on top that will be pleated. So this base is going to be like a cup, and that's what is going to keep the pleats firm and the bust area firm rather than it dropping. Then you're now going to attach another piece of fabric that's going to be pleated, instead of just doing a piece of fabric that will be pleated and attaching. That will not make the bust areas lack structure. We don't do that here. I like when my bust area is well structured, especially for a strapless dress or a dress with tiny straps, because how are you going to hold the bust area firm? So this is going to be a base, and then we're going to need another one to support it. So what you want to do is measure everything you have here. This is giving me 6, and depending on how much pleats you want it to be, you are going to times it by 2 or by 3. I think times it by 2 or 3 is more than enough. So I'm going to do 6 times 3, which will give me 18. So I'm going to cut another piece of fabric that is 18 inches long, and the length from here to here is 7 inches. and 7 inches wide. Okay, now remember that we have not added seam allowance to this. If we're adding seam allowance, we're going to add here half of an inch and here half of an inch, which equals to 1 inch. We are going to take that into consideration when cutting the fabric. So ideally, if I want to add just the seam allowance, it will be 8 inches I will add to the pattern for the pleats. Okay, but just because I want to be on the safe side, remember that this is going to form a cup, and that cup can end up taking more from the fabric, and you do not want that. So I'm going to just make it 9.5 inch, so that after pleating it on top, if there's any excess, I can easily trim it off rather than having a shortage of fabric. For that pleat, I'm going to also do it on the pattern so it is easy for all of you to understand. Remember, I said I'm going to be using 9.5 inch. So I'm going to come to the edge of the paper and mark 9.5. And just do this. Next, you want to determine the length. Remember, I said I'm using 6 times 3, which will give me a 10. So this is it here. Let me mark it on the edge of the paper here as well. Okay. So I'm just going to cut it out. And this is going to be the pleat. So I'll cut it out this way. This is it here. Now I'm going to go ahead and separate this. Okay. So you will have enough to pleat by the time that you are done. Let's move on to the back. So guys, for the back of the corset, it's nothing too extra. You can even use the front to cut the back, but I'm just going to go ahead and do the back separately. I have another video where I showed how to use the front to cut the back. I'll link it in the description in case you're interested in doing that. So I've taken out my basic bodice measurements and I've taken in my dart. I always use 1.5 inch as my dart allowance. And remember that this is my back half length, not my front half length. So what I'm just going to do is also take my waist measurement here. You place the dart allowance of 1.5 and come here, take my bust, which is 9.2. Then for the armhole, you want to divide what you have by 2 for the back. Okay, remember for the front, it just came up by 3 inches. Then go in by half of an inch. However, this armhole point does not even matter because we're not going to use it. So I'm just going to connect the 2 points together and then add my half an inch seam allowance. So I'm sorry I didn't draw out the bust points because whatever measurement is at the chest line is what will also be at the bust point. But if I'm to add the bust points, I know this is 2 inches below. So just to make sure that you are correct, you can come straight this way, which is what I should have done, and then go in. But you can see that it does not even make much of a difference. So now I'm going to go ahead and add my seam allowance of 1.5 inch. With that, the pattern is almost ready. Remember that we extended the front half length by 1 inch. So I'm going to be doing the same thing for the back as well, just to give it that drop waist effect. So of course, I need to take the darts out to this point. Okay? So the next thing I want to do is to cross check that these 2 parts match. If they don't, you correct it. So as you guys can see, it is a match. Remember that I added half an inch seam allowance to this armhole area. So that's what is making it to be a bit different. Now I will just trace what I have. Seam allowance for the armhole. And now I'm just going to, for use a straight line to connect it. This is for the back. Okay, and of course you want to extend the darts to meet with this point. If you want to add a zip allowance, now with the time, let's assume I'm adding a zip allowance. This is what I've used. So I've used 2 inches. Then the final thing that you want to do is to come up from the center back by 1 inch and reconnect it back into the side back. This is to eliminate zip bulge. So if you want to use the front to cut the back, this is what you will do. You will just place the front and trace it out. But that will mean that you're not going to add a dart to the back, because you can see now that what I have is different, because I've not yet taken out my dart allowance of 1.5 inch, and the same allowance is 1.5 inch. So it is exactly 1.5 inch that is making these 2 patterns to be different. Once I've taken out my dart for the back, everything will relax. So I like when there's a dart at the back of my dress, so that everything will relax well. There will be no folding at the back. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut it out. That is really all for the back. So guys, with this, the pattern is ready. I strongly advise that you watch my other tutorial on how to sew a Milkmaid corset dress, so that you understand how to piece all of this together, because this place is going to be quite technical. So if you are not really good at making bustiers and corsets, then you need to watch that tutorial so you understand how I'm going to fuse all of this together to make that Milkmaid design. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next tutorial. Bye.